When my 28-year-old son looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're just a tenant here, Mom," I never imagined those words would lead to the most satisfying legal revenge of my life. What happened next changed everything between us forever. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The morning everything changed like any other Tuesday in October. I was in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd made thousands of school lunches, birthday cakes, and late-night snacks for Marcus over the years, brewing my usual cup of coffee when I heard his heavy footsteps on the stairs. My name is Patricia Holloway, and at 52, I thought I had my life figured out. I'd worked as a senior accountant at Morrison & Associates for the past 15 years, owned my beautiful 4-bedroom colonial home in Westchester County, New York, and had what I believed was a good relationship with my only child, Marcus. Marcus had moved back home after college graduation 6 years ago. What started as a temporary arrangement while he figured things out had somehow become permanent. He worked sporadically as a freelance graphic designer, contributed maybe $300 a month when he remembered, and had gradually taken over more and more of my house. That particular morning, Marcus came downstairs wearing the same wrinkled t-shirt he'd worn for 3 days straight, his dark hair disheveled, stubble covering his jaw. He was on his phone, as usual, talking loudly to someone about a gaming tournament. "Mom, you need to keep it down with that coffee machine," he said, barely glancing at me. "Tyler's staying over again tonight, and we're planning to stream until, like 4 a.m. I looked at him, confused. "Marcus, it's 7:30 in the morning. I'm getting ready for work. And this is the 3rd time this week Tyler's sleeping over." "Yeah, so? This is important. We're trying to build our Twitch following. You wouldn't understand. Tyler Martinez was Marcus's best friend since high school, a 27-year-old who seemed to live more at my house than his own apartment. He ate my food, used my streaming services, and had somehow claimed my guest bedroom as his second residence. I understand you're pursuing your interests," I said carefully. "But I do need to maintain my morning routine. I have a job to get to." Marcus rolled his eyes. "Whatever, just try to be more considerate. Be more considerate. In my own home." The irony wasn't lost on me. This wasn't the first conversation of this type we'd had. Over the past year, Marcus had become increasingly demanding and entitled. He'd rearranged my living room furniture without asking, claiming it was better for his gaming setup. He'd taken over my home office, saying he needed the space for his graphic design work, forcing me to do my own work at the kitchen table. He'd invited friends over for loud parties that lasted until dawn, telling me I should wear earplugs if the noise bothered me. But I'd tolerated it all because he was my son. Because after his father, Robert, had walked out on us when Marcus was 12, I'd made it my mission to give Marcus everything he needed. Maybe I'd given him too much. The breaking point came 3 weeks later, on a rainy Thursday evening in November. I'd had an exhausting day at work. One of our biggest clients, Henderson Manufacturing, had discovered a significant discrepancy in their quarterly reports that required immediate attention. I'd stayed late to help resolve the issue, finally leaving the office at 8 p.m. with a splitting headache and a briefcase full of documents to review at home. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed 5 cars parked on my street and in my driveway, none of them mine. The windows of my house were glowing with colored lights, and I could hear bass-heavy music thumping from inside. I used my key to enter through the front door and was immediately hit by the smell of beer and something else I couldn't identify. My living room was packed with people I didn't recognize, mostly in their 20s, lounging on my furniture, eating from my kitchen, using my bathroom. Marcus was in the center of it all, controller in hand, playing some violent video game on my 65-inch television while a crowd cheered him on. Empty beer bottles covered my coffee table, someone had spilled red wine on my cream-colored carpet, and there were pizza boxes stacked on my antique dining room table. "Marcus!" I called out, having to shout over the music. He glanced over, annoyed, at the interruption. "Oh, hey, Mom. Didn't expect you back so early." "It's after 8 p.m. and I live here," I said, setting down my briefcase and surveying the damage. "What is all this?" "Just a small get-together. We're celebrating. Tyler finally hit 1,000 followers on his stream." "A small get-together?" I gestured at the crowd. "There are at least 20 people here, Marcus. You didn't ask permission, you didn't even tell me." The music was so loud that several people had turned to watch our conversation. Marcus's face flushed red. "Permission?" He laughed, a harsh sound that made my stomach turn. "Mom, I'm 28 years old. I don't need permission to have friends over. In my house, you do." That's when Tyler appeared beside Marcus, a beer in his hand and a smirk on his face. "Whoa, Mrs. H is really laying down the law tonight." Marcus turned to Tyler, shaking his head. "I know, right? She acts like she owns the place." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Marcus, I do own this place. This is my house." Marcus looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, cold, dismissive, almost cruel. "Technically, yeah, your name's on the deed. But let's be real here, Mom. You're basically just a tenant at this point." The room had gone quiet. 20 pairs of eyes were watching us, waiting to see what would happen next. I felt my face burn with humiliation and anger. "A tenant?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Come on, don't be dramatic," Marcus said, waving his hand dismissively. "You work all day, come home, go to your room, watch your boring shows. Tyler and I are the ones actually living here, using the space, making it feel like home. You're just here, like a really quiet roommate who pays the bills." Tyler laughed. "Yeah, like the world's most uptight landlord. Except she's not even the landlord," Marcus added, warming to his theme. "She's just some lady who happens to sleep upstairs. This is our space now." The cruelty in his voice, the casual way he dismissed everything I'd done for him, everything I'd sacrificed. It was like being stabbed in the heart by the person you'd die to protect. I looked around the room at all these strangers in my home, eating my food, drinking my beverages, using my electricity, my water, my internet. I thought about the mortgage payments I'd never missed, the property taxes I paid every year, the maintenance and repairs I handled, the insurance I carried. "Everyone needs to leave," I said quietly. "What?" Marcus laughed again. "Mom, don't be ridiculous. Everyone needs to leave my house." Now, Marcus's expression darkened. "You're being completely unreasonable. These are my friends, and this is my home too." "No, Marcus, this is my home, and I'm asking everyone to leave." The crowd began to shift uncomfortably. A few people near the door started gathering their things, sensing the tension. "This is bullshit," Marcus said loudly. "Mom, you're embarrassing yourself." But I wasn't backing down, not this time. "You have 5 minutes to get everyone out, or I'm calling the police." Tyler stepped forward. "Mrs. H, come on, don't be like this. We're not hurting anything." I pointed to the wine stain on my carpet, the beer bottles, the pizza grease on my antique table. "Get out of my house." It took 15 minutes, but eventually the crowd dispersed. Marcus and Tyler were the last to leave, both of them glaring at me with undisguised resentment. "This isn't over," Marcus said as he grabbed his jacket. "You can't just kick me out of my own home?" "Your own home?" I repeated. "Marcus, you just told a room full of people that I'm basically a tenant here." I was joking around. "God, you're so sensitive. Were you joking when you said this was your space now? When you said I'm just some lady who sleeps upstairs?" Marcus had the decency to look slightly ashamed, but Tyler jumped in. "Look, Mrs. H, you're taking this way too seriously. Marcus didn't mean anything by it." "Don't tell me what my son meant," I said sharply. "And don't call me Mrs. H. You don't live here anymore, Tyler." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're not welcome in my house anymore. Either of you." Marcus's mouth fell open. "Mom, you can't be serious." Deadly serious. I want both. Of you out. Tonight. Where am I supposed to go? Marcus demanded. This is my home. You just spent the last 20 minutes explaining to everyone how this isn't my home, how I'm just a tenant, how this space belongs to you and Tyler. So figure it out. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him calculating, trying to decide if I was bluffing. Fine, he said finally. But this isn't over, Mom. This is my house too, and you can't just kick me out because you had a bad day at work. Actually, Marcus, I can. Because despite what you told your friends, my name is the only one on the deed. My name is the only one on the mortgage. My name is on the insurance, the utilities, the property taxes. This is my house, and you are no longer welcome in it. They left that night, but Marcus's words kept echoing in my mind. This isn't over. He was right about that, but not in the way he thought. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Margaret Chen had been my attorney for 8 years, handling everything from my divorce settlement to updating my will. Her office on Madison Avenue always smelled like fresh coffee and expensive leather, and she had a reputation for being both brilliant and ruthlessly practical. When I walked into her office that Friday morning, she took one look at my face and poured me a cup of her signature Colombian blend without asking. Patricia, you look like someone who's about to make a very expensive decision, she said, settling behind her mahogany desk. Tell me everything. I laid out the situation methodically. Marcus's escalating behavior, the unauthorized parties, his casual dismissal of my ownership, and finally, his declaration that I was just a tenant in my own home. Margaret listened without interruption, occasionally jotting notes on her legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. So your son believes he has some kind of inherent right to your property, she said. And he's made it clear he doesn't respect your authority as the homeowner. That's exactly right. But Margaret, I need to know, legally speaking, what are my options? Can I actually evict my own son? Margaret smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Patricia, your son just handed you the perfect opportunity to teach him a lesson he'll never forget. The question is, how far are you willing to go? She opened a thick folder and pulled out several documents. Let's start with the basics. You own the property outright, correct? No co-signers, no joint ownership? Correct. I bought the house in 2018 after my divorce was finalized. Marcus was in college then. The deed, mortgage, insurance, everything is in my name alone. Perfect. Now, has Marcus ever paid rent? Do you have any formal rental agreement? I shook my head. He's contributed sporadically to groceries and utilities, maybe $300 or $400 a month when he remembers, but never anything formal, never a lease. Even better. Margaret made another note. This means Marcus is what we call a licensee, someone who's been permitted to occupy the property by the owner's grace, but has no legal right to remain there. She pulled out a different document. However, Patricia, there's something else we could explore. Something that might be far more educational for your son. What do you mean? Margaret leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with the kind of enthusiasm she usually reserved for particularly complex cases. What if, instead of simply evicting Marcus, we make him face the reality of what he's been taking for granted all these years? I'm not following. Your son thinks you're just a tenant, right? He believes this house is essentially his domain, that you're just some woman who happens to sleep upstairs and pay the bills. What if we make that arrangement official? My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. Official how? We create a formal landlord-tenant relationship. You become his actual landlord, he becomes your actual tenant, and suddenly all those things he's been taking for granted, the free housing, the utilities, the food, the cleaning, the maintenance, become itemized expenses with real consequences. The idea was so audacious it took my breath away. Is that even legal? Absolutely. In fact, it's brilliant. You draw up a proper lease agreement, establish fair market rent for your area, include all the standard landlord responsibilities, and tenant obligations, late fees, property rules, guest policies, noise ordinances, everything. Margaret pulled up something on her computer. According to recent data, a 4-bedroom house in your Westchester neighborhood rents for approximately $3,800 to $4,200 per month. Add utilities, and we're looking at around $4,500 monthly. I nearly choked on my coffee. $4,500? That's the going rate. Your son has been living in a property worth nearly $54,000 per year, completely, free of charge. Not to mention the food, internet, cable, maintenance, insurance, and property taxes you've been covering. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than hurt and anger. I felt empowered. How would this work exactly? Margaret was already pulling forms from her filing cabinet. We draft a comprehensive lease agreement, month to month initially, so you maintain maximum flexibility. Market rate rent, security deposit, standard lease terms. If he wants to stay, he pays. If he can't pay, he leaves. Either way, he learns the true cost of what he's been receiving for free. But what if he refuses to sign? Then you proceed with a standard eviction. But Patricia, here's the beautiful part. By offering him the lease first, you're demonstrating that you're being more than fair. You're giving him the exact arrangement he seems to want, a formal tenant-landlord relationship. I spent the next 2 hours going over every detail with Margaret. The lease would include standard provisions about rent payment, property maintenance, guest policies, and noise restrictions. But we also added some special clauses that addressed Marcus's specific behaviors. No parties exceeding 4 people without 48-hour written notice. No overnight guests for more than 3 consecutive nights per month. Tenant responsible for all damages to property. Late rent fees of $50 per day after the 5th of each month. Violation of noise ordinances after 10 p.m. would result in a $100 fine per incident. This seems almost too harsh, I said, reviewing the draft. Patricia? These are standard lease terms. You'll find similar language in most rental agreements throughout New York. The only difference is that Marcus has never had to face these realities before. Margaret printed out the final documents. I'm also preparing a formal notice to quit, just in case he refuses the lease option. This gives him 30 days to either sign the rental agreement or vacate the premises. 30 days? New York law requires 30 days notice for month-to-month occupancy situations. But honestly, I suspect he'll be so shocked by the rent amount that he'll realize how good he's had it. That weekend, I spent hours researching rental prices in my area. Margaret had been conservative in her estimates. Similar properties were listing for even higher amounts. A 4-bedroom colonial with a 2-car garage, finished basement, and large yard in Westchester County was premium real estate. I also calculated what Marcus's free living arrangement had cost me over the past 6 years, beyond the obvious expenses like increased utilities, food, and wear and tear on the property. There were hidden costs I'd never fully considered. The home office I'd converted back to a bedroom for him. The guest room that Tyler had essentially claimed, preventing me from having my own visitors. The living room furniture I'd replaced twice because of damage from his parties. The professional carpet cleaning every few months. The increased homeowner's insurance premiums due to the higher occupancy and frequent gatherings. When I tallied everything up, Marcus's free living arrangement had cost me approximately $2,800 per month over 6 years, nearly $202,000 total, $200,000. That's what my generosity had cost me, and he'd repaid it by calling me a tenant in my own home. Monday morning, I took a personal day from work. Marcus had been staying at Tyler's apartment since our confrontation, but he'd left most of his belongings in my house. I knew he'd have to come back eventually. I was right. Around noon, I heard his key in the front door. He called out tentatively, "Mom? Are you here?" "I'm in the kitchen, Marcus." He appeared in the doorway looking sheepish and tired. He'd obviously been sleeping on Tyler's couch. His clothes were wrinkled, and he looked like he hadn't showered in days. "Hey," he said awkwardly. "Can we talk?" "Of course. Sit down." Marcus pulled out a chair across from me at the kitchen table. "Look, Mom, I've been thinking about what happened Thursday night. Maybe I said some things I didn't mean." "Some things you didn't mean?" the tenant commented. That was out of line. I was just frustrated because you embarrassed me in front of my friends." I studied my son's face. "Marcus, do you remember what else you said that night?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I said a lot of things. We both did. You said this house was your space now. You said I was just some lady who sleeps upstairs. You told Tyler I was like a really quiet roommate who pays the bills." Marcus winced. "I was showing off, okay?" Tyler and the guys were laughing, and I got carried away. "I didn't really mean it." "But you did mean it, Marcus. You've been treating me like an unwanted guest in my own home for months. The parties, the mess, taking over my office, rearranging my furniture without asking, telling me to be more considerate when I make coffee in my own kitchen. Okay, fine. Maybe I've been a little inconsiderate lately. But Mom, we can work this out. I'll be more respectful, help out more around the house. I promise." I reached across the table and pulled out the folder Margaret had prepared. "Marcus, I've been thinking about what you said Thursday night. About how this is your space. About how I'm basically just a tenant here." His eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What do you mean?" "You were right. The current arrangement isn't working. You're a grown man who deserves to have a proper adult relationship. With housing, not some informal arrangement where you live off your mother's generosity." "Mom, where is this going?" I opened the folder and slid the lease agreement across the table. "You want to live here as an adult? Perfect. Here's a standard rental lease for the property. Fair market rate, standard terms, everything above board. And professional." Marcus picked up the document, and I watched his face change as he read the first page. $4,500 a month? That's actually below market rate for this area. I had a realtor friend run some comparables. "Mom, you can't be serious. I can't afford $4,500 a month." "Then you'll need to find somewhere you can afford." Marcus flipped through the pages, his expression growing more incredulous by the second. "A security deposit? Guest restrictions? Noise ordinances? Mom, this is insane." "These are standard lease terms, Marcus. You'll find similar requirements in any rental property." "But I'm your son." I leaned back in my chair, feeling calmer than I had in weeks. "Yes, you are. And as my son, you've been living rent-free in a premium property for 6 years. But you made it very clear Thursday night that you don't want a mother-son living arrangement. You want to be treated like an independent adult who has equal claim to this space." Marcus stared at the lease agreement, then back at me. "This is about revenge, isn't it? You're trying to punish me for what I said." "This is about respect, Marcus. For 6 years, I've provided you with free housing worth approximately $54,000 per year. I've paid for utilities, food, maintenance, insurance, property taxes. I've given you unlimited access to internet, cable, a fully furnished home, a private bedroom, shared common areas, laundry facilities, and complete freedom to come and go as you please." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the yard I'd spent countless weekends maintaining. In return, I asked for basic respect and consideration. Instead, you told a room full of strangers that I'm essentially a squatter in my own home. I apologized for that. You apologized for getting caught saying what you really think. But Marcus, your words revealed something important. You genuinely believe you have more right to this house than I do. So, let's make it official. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, reading through the lease terms. Finally, he looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "What if I don't sign this?" I pulled out the second document Margaret had prepared. Then you have 30 days to find alternative housing. This is a formal notice to quit the premises. The color drained from Marcus's face. You're actually evicting? Me? I'm giving you two options, Marcus. Option 1. Sign the lease, pay market rate rent, and follow standard tenant obligations. Option 2. Find somewhere else to live. What I won't do anymore is subsidize your lifestyle while you treat me like an unwelcome guest in my own home. Marcus stared at both documents for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I need time to think about this. You have until next Friday to decide. That gives you a full week. He gathered up the papers and stood, slowly. Mom, I can't believe you're actually doing this. Neither can I, Marcus. But you're the one who changed the rules of our relationship. I'm just adapting to the new reality you created. After he left, I sat alone in my kitchen and wondered if I was doing the right thing. But then I remembered the look on his face when he'd called me a tenant, the cruel laughter from his friends, the months of being treated like a burden in my own home. For the first time in 6 years, I felt like I was taking control of my own life. The week that followed was the longest of my life. Marcus avoided the house completely, and I found myself walking through rooms that suddenly felt too quiet, too empty. But whenever doubt crept in, I remembered his words. You're just a tenant here, Mom. Wednesday evening, my phone rang. It was my sister Jennifer calling from her home in Phoenix. Patricia, I just got off the phone with Marcus, she said without preamble. He says you're trying to charge him $4,000 to live at home. Please tell me he's exaggerating. I sank into my favorite armchair, the one Marcus had tried to move to accommodate his gaming setup. He's not exaggerating, Jen. $4,500, Patricia? For your own son? Have you lost your mind? Have you talked to Marcus about what led to this conversation? There was a pause. He said you had an argument about a party, that you overreacted and kicked everyone out. Did he mention calling me a tenant in my own house? In front of 20 strangers? Another pause, longer this time. He said you took something he said out of context. I spent the next 20 minutes explaining the full situation to Jennifer. By the end, her tone had completely changed. Oh, Patricia. I had no idea it had gotten that bad. 6 years, Jen. 6 years of supporting him while he treated me like I was in his way. But $4,500? That seems like what it actually costs to live in a 4-bedroom house in Westchester County. Marcus has been getting that benefit for free while treating me like garbage. I'm just asking him to pay for what he's been receiving. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. What do you think he'll choose? Honestly, I think he'll move out. He can't afford the rent, and he's too proud to admit he needs help. And you're okay with that? I looked around my living room, noticing for the first time in months how peaceful it felt without Marcus's gaming equipment dominating every surface. Jen, for the first time in years, I feel like I'm living in my own home instead of just maintaining someone else's crash pad. Thursday morning brought a surprise visitor. I was getting ready for work when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Tyler Martinez standing on my front porch, shifting nervously from foot to foot. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Tyler. Mrs. Holloway, can we talk? Please? Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let him into the foyer. Make it quick. I have to leave for work in 10 minutes. Tyler looked uncomfortable, running his hands through his hair. Look, I know things got heated the other night. Marcus told me about the lease thing, and I wanted to apologize for my part. In all this? Your part? The stuff I said laughing when Marcus called you a tenant. That wasn't cool. I was drunk and stupid, and I'm sorry. I studied Tyler's face. He seemed genuinely remorseful, which was more than I could say for my son. Apology accepted. The thing is, Mrs. Holloway, Marcus is really struggling with this whole situation. He's been crashing on my couch all week and he's kind of a mess. He has until tomorrow to make his decision. Yeah, about that. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. He asked me to talk to you, to see if maybe you'd consider lowering the rent or phasing it in gradually. I felt a familiar surge of anger. He sent you to negotiate for him? He's embarrassed, okay? He knows he messed up, but he's too proud to admit it directly. Tyler, let me ask you something. How much do you pay for your apartment? $1,200 a month, but it's just a studio. $1,200 for a studio, and you think $4,500 is unreasonable for a 4-bedroom house with a yard, garage, and finished basement? Tyler's face flushed. When you put it like that, when I put it honestly, you mean? I glanced at my watch. Tyler, I appreciate the apology, but I'm not negotiating with Marcus through intermediaries. He has my offer. He can take it or leave it. Friday came faster than I expected. I'd taken another personal day, knowing that whatever Marcus decided, it would be a difficult conversation. He arrived at 2 p.m. carrying a duffel bag and looking like he hadn't slept in days. When he walked into the kitchen, I could see the resignation in his posture. I can't afford it, he said without preamble. The rent. I can't afford $4,500 a month. I figured as much. Marcus pulled out a chair and sat down, heavily. My graphic design work brings in maybe $1,500 a month on a good month. Some months it's less than $1,000. For the first time, I was hearing honest numbers about Marcus's income. What about getting a steady job? I've been trying, Mom, but most places want full-time commitment, and I've been trying to build my freelance business. For 6 years? Marcus winced. I know how it sounds, but I really thought I could make it work. I sat across from him, the same way we'd sat the previous week when I'd presented the lease. Marcus, do you understand now why I was so hurt by what you said? You mean the tenant thing? I mean all of it. You've been living a lifestyle worth $50,000 a year, completely free, while contributing maybe $3,000 annually. And instead of being grateful, you treated me like I was inconveniencing you. Marcus stared at his hands. I didn't think about it that way. You didn't think about it at all. You just took it for granted. We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Marcus looked up at me with an expression I hadn't seen since he was a child. Vulnerable, uncertain, genuinely remorseful. Mom, I screwed up. Not just with what I said, but with everything. The way I've been acting, taking advantage of your generosity, treating your house like it was mine. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Thank you for saying that. The thing is, I don't know what to do now. I can't afford to live on my own, not with what I'm making. But I also can't afford to stay here under the lease terms. I had been expecting this moment all week, and I'd prepared for it. Marcus, I have a counter-proposal. His head snapped up. What kind of counter-proposal? I pulled out a folder I'd prepared with Margaret's help. A different kind of arrangement. Not a standard lease, not a free ride, but something in between. Marcus looked, wary. I'm listening. You pay $1,200 a month in rent. That covers your bedroom and shared access to common areas. Utilities are included, but you buy your own food. No parties without prior approval. No overnight guests more than 2 nights per week. You help maintain the house. Lawn care, snow, removal, basic upkeep, and most importantly, you get a full-time job within 60 days. Marcus blinked. $1,200? That's manageable. It's below market rate, but it's not free. You'll be contributing meaningfully to the household, expenses while learning to budget and save money. And if I don't find a full-time job in 60 days? Then you move out, and we revisit the arrangement when you're ready to be fully independent. Marcus read through the modified agreement carefully. This is still a formal lease? Absolutely. With all the legal protections and obligations that entails. Late fees, damage deposits, proper notice for termination. You'll be a tenant, Marcus, but a legitimate one with a fair rental rate. Why are you doing this? After everything I said, everything I put you through, why are you giving me another chance? I looked at my son, really looked at him. Underneath, the stubble and the wrinkled clothes and the defeated posture, I could still see the little boy who used to help me bake cookies, who would fall asleep reading with his head on my shoulder, who once told me I was the best mom in the world. Because despite everything, you're still my son, and because I think you've learned something important this week. What's that? The difference between being entitled to something and being grateful for it. Marcus signed the new lease that afternoon. But the real change didn't happen with his signature. It happened over the following weeks. The first sign was the job applications. Within 3 days of signing the lease, Marcus had applied to 15 different positions. Graphic design roles, marketing assistant positions, even retail jobs that offered steady income with benefits. The second sign was the rent payment. On the 1st of December, Marcus handed me an envelope containing 12 crisp $100 bills. "First month's rent," he said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. The third sign was the house rules. Without being asked, Marcus started cleaning up after himself, keeping common areas tidy, asking permission before having Tyler over. He even helped me decorate for Christmas, something he hadn't done in years. But the biggest change was in how he talked to me. The dismissive tone, the eye-rolling, the casual disrespect, all of it was gone. He started asking about my day, offering to help with groceries, actually listening when I spoke. 2 weeks into December, Marcus got a call back from a digital marketing agency in White Plains. They wanted him for a junior graphic designer position, with benefits and room for advancement. "Mom," he said, bursting into the kitchen after the interview, "I think I got it. They said they'd call by Friday with an offer." "That's wonderful, Marcus. How do you feel about it?" "Nervous, excited, scared." He paused. "Grateful." "Grateful? If you hadn't forced me to face reality, I'd still be coasting, making excuses, taking everything for granted. This whole experience, as awful as it was, woke me up." Friday came, and with it, the job offer. Full-time position, $45,000 annually plus benefits, 2 weeks paid vacation, and room for advancement based on performance. Marcus accepted immediately. That weekend, he asked if we could have a serious conversation about his living situation. "I've been thinking," he said as we sat in the living room, the same room where he'd humiliated me in front of his friends just a month earlier. "With the new job, I can afford to pay more in rent. The $1,200 was generous, but I want to contribute fairly." "Marcus, we agreed on $1,200. You don't have to." "Yes, I do." "Mom, I calculated what I've been costing you all these years. Not just the obvious stuff, but everything. Insurance, wear and tear, utilities, food, the opportunity cost of not being able to rent out rooms to actual paying tenants. I've been a financial burden for 6 years. I started to protest, but he held up his hand. "Let me finish. I want to pay $1,800 a month going forward. It's still below market rate, but it's fair. It covers my actual costs, plus a reasonable profit for you as the landlord." "Marcus, you don't have to call me your landlord." He smiled, and for the first time in months it reached his eyes. "Actually, I do. Not because you're not my mom, but because being your tenant, your real tenant, with real responsibilities and real consequences, taught me what it means to be an adult." That night, I called Jennifer to update her on everything that had happened. "So he's staying?" she asked. "For now." "But Jen, it's completely different. He's different." "How so?" I looked around my house, my clean, peaceful, respectfully maintained house. "He sees me now, not as someone who's supposed to take care of him, but as someone who chooses to. And that's made all the difference." 3 months later, Marcus moved into his own apartment. He'd saved enough for a security deposit and first month's rent, found a nice one-bedroom place 15 minutes from his job, and was ready to be completely independent. The day he moved out, he handed me an envelope. What's this? Open it. Inside was a check for $2,400 and a handwritten letter. The check was made out for security deposit return plus interest. The letter was 2 pages long, but one paragraph stood out. Mom, I spent years taking your generosity for granted and treating your love like an obligation. When you made me your tenant, you didn't just teach me the value of what I'd been receiving for free. You taught me the difference between being entitled and being grateful. I will never forget that lesson, and I will never take your love for granted again. 6 months after that, Marcus got promoted to senior graphic designer. A year later, he bought his own condo. And every month, without fail, he takes me to dinner and thanks me for teaching him the most important lesson of his adult life. That respect isn't something you demand, it's something you earn. The best part? He hasn't called me a tenant since. 2 years after Marcus moved into his own place, I thought our story was complete. I was wrong. The lessons we'd both learned were about to be tested in ways I never could have anticipated. It started with a phone call on a rainy Tuesday evening in March. I was reviewing quarterly reports for one of my accounting clients when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Patricia Holloway? Yes, this is Patricia. Mrs. Holloway, this is Detective Sarah Rodriguez with the Westchester County Police Department. I'm calling about your son, Marcus. My blood turned to ice. What happened? Is he hurt? No, ma'am, he's not injured. But we have him in custody, and he's asked us to call you. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Custody? For what? I'd prefer to discuss this in person, Mrs. Holloway. Can you come down to the station? The drive to the police station was a blur of worst-case scenarios racing through my mind. Marcus had been doing so well. Steady job, his own apartment, a relationship with a nice girl named Amy Chen from his marketing firm. What could have possibly gone wrong? Detective Rodriguez met me in the lobby. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me slightly at ease. Mrs. Holloway, I want to assure you first that Marcus is not in serious trouble. He's being cooperative, and the charges are relatively minor. What charges? Trespassing and disturbing the peace. He was arrested at a property in Scarsdale around 9 p.m. tonight. I stared at her, completely confused. Trespassing? Marcus doesn't know anyone in Scarsdale. That's what made this situation unusual enough that I wanted to speak with you personally. The property where he was arrested? It belongs to Robert Holloway. My ex-husband's name hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't heard from Robert in over 3 years, not since Marcus had graduated from college. I don't understand. What was Marcus doing at his father's house? Detective Rodriguez led me to a small conference room and closed the door. According to Marcus, he went there to confront his father about some money. Apparently, there was a disagreement that escalated, and neighbors called in a noise complaint. When officers arrived, Marcus was on the front lawn refusing to leave. A disagreement about money? Mrs. Holloway, I think it would be best if you heard this directly from your son. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Marcus in a different conference room. He looked exhausted and embarrassed, his usually neat appearance disheveled. Mom, I'm so sorry you had to come down here. Marcus, what on earth happened? What were you doing at your father's house? Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized from his childhood when he was struggling to explain something difficult. Remember how I told you I was saving money for a down payment on a house? I nodded. Marcus had been working toward buying his own place for the past year, diligently saving every month. Well, I was talking to Amy about it last week, and she mentioned that sometimes parents help their kids with down payments. Like, it's pretty common for families to pool resources for major purchases. A sinking feeling was developing in my stomach. Marcus. So I started thinking about Dad. I know he walked out on us. I know he's been pretty much absent from my life. But he's doing well financially. He's got that big house in Scarsdale. The law practice is successful. I thought maybe If I approached him right, he might be willing to help. Oh, Marcus. I know it was stupid, okay? But I figured the worst he could say was no, right? Detective Rodriguez had been quietly observing our conversation. Marcus, why don't you tell your mother what happened when you went to see your father? Marcus's face darkened. I showed up around 7 p.m. I'd called ahead, told him I wanted to talk about something important. He seemed curious, I guess. He let me in, offered me a drink, asked about work, my apartment. For a few minutes, it almost felt normal. Then what happened? I explained my situation, told him about saving for a house, how home prices have gone up, how a parental gift could really make the difference. I wasn't asking for a handout. I had numbers prepared, showing my income, my savings, my credit score. I wanted him to see that I was being responsible. Marcus paused, staring at his hands. At first, he seemed impressed. He said he was proud of how I'd turned my life around, how mature I'd become. He asked about my job, my savings plan, even about Amy. That sounds positive. It was until I mentioned you. The sinking feeling in my stomach intensified. What about me? I told him about our situation a couple years ago, about how you'd made me sign a lease, pay rent, learn to budget, and be responsible. I was trying to show him how I'd learned to manage money, how I'd become financially responsible. Marcus looked up at me with an expression of deep regret. Mom, I thought it was a good story. I thought it showed growth and maturity. I had no idea how he'd react. How did he react? He laughed. Not a good laugh, this cold, ugly laugh. He said, "So Patricia finally stopped babying you, huh? Only took her 30 years to figure out how to be a parent." I felt heat rising in my cheeks. Even after all these years, Robert could still find ways to hurt me. I told him that wasn't fair, that you'd been an amazing mother, and that what you did helped me grow up. That just made him laugh harder. Marcus's voice was getting tighter, more emotional. Then he said, "Marcus, do you want to know why I really left your mother? It wasn't another woman. It wasn't work stress. It was watching her turn you into a helpless, entitled brat who couldn't function without mommy taking care of everything." I gasped. He said that? It gets worse. He said, "Patricia created a monster, and then she finally had to clean up her own mess. And now you want me to reward that dysfunction with a down payment?" He stood up and told me the conversation was over. Detective Rodriguez leaned forward. "Marcus, tell your mother what happened next." Marcus's face flushed red. "I lost it, Mom. I completely lost my temper. I told him he had no right to criticize you, that he'd abandoned us both and had no idea what kind of parent you'd been. I told him he was a coward who walked away from his family when things got difficult. And he told me to get out of his house, but I wasn't finished. I kept yelling, telling him exactly what I thought of him, how you'd been both mother and father to me, how you'd sacrificed everything to give me opportunities he never bothered to provide." Marcus looked directly at me. "Mom, I told him that making me your tenant was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it taught me values. He never did. I told him you were 10 times the parent he ever was." Despite the circumstances, I felt a surge of pride and love for my son. The neighbors called the police because I was shouting on his front lawn. When the officers showed up, I was so angry. I refused to leave. That's when they arrested me. Detective Rodriguez cleared her throat. "Mrs. Holloway, given the circumstances and Marcus's clean record, we're willing to release him on his own recognizance. The charges will likely be reduced to a fine and community service." "Thank you, Detective. I appreciate your consideration." An hour later, Marcus and I were sitting in my car in the police station parking lot. Neither of us had spoken since leaving the building. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "Mom, I'm sorry I brought you into this. And I'm sorry I went to see Dad without talking to you first." Marcus, why didn't you come to me if you needed help with a down payment? He was quiet for a long moment. Because you'd already done so much. You supported me for 6 years. Then you helped me learn to be independent. I didn't want to ask for more. Sweetheart, there's a difference between asking for help and demanding it. And there's a difference between a parent supporting their child and enabling them. I know that now. But I thought maybe if Dad contributed something, anything, it would balance things out. Like maybe he could finally do one parental thing. I reached over and took his hand. Marcus, your father left us a long time ago. Not just physically, but emotionally. He made his choice, and we made ours. We don't need his validation or his money. But the house? We'll figure out the house. Together. As a family. The next morning, I called Margaret Chen and explained the situation. By afternoon, we had a plan. Patricia, there are several options for helping Marcus with a down payment that would be beneficial for both of you, Margaret explained over coffee in her office. I'm listening. Family gift programs, co-signing arrangements, even investment, partnerships. But given your history with Marcus, I'd recommend something more structured. Margaret pulled out several documents. A family loan. You lend Marcus part of his down payment at a below-market interest rate. He gets the house, you get a steady return on your investment, and everything is legally documented. How would that work? Let's say Marcus needs $50,000 for a down payment. You loan him the money at 3% interest over 10 years. His monthly payment to you would be around $480. Compare that to the $1,800 he was paying in rent, and it's very manageable. The arrangement made perfect sense. Marcus would get his house, I'd get a return on my investment, and the formal structure would maintain the healthy boundaries we'd established. When I presented the idea to Marcus that evening, his response surprised me. Mom, that's incredibly generous, but I need to think about it. Think about what? Whether I'm ready for that level of responsibility. Buying a house, taking on a mortgage, borrowing money from you. It's a big step. This was the Marcus I'd hoped to raise. Thoughtful, careful, considering consequences before making major decisions. Take all the time you need, I told him. The offer stands whenever you're ready. 2 weeks later, Marcus called me with his decision. I want to wait another year, he said. I want to save more money on my own, get promoted to the senior position. That's opening up, and make sure I'm completely stable before taking on a mortgage. That sounds very mature. The arrest was a wake-up call, Mom. Not because I got in trouble, but because it made me realize I was still looking for shortcuts. Still hoping someone else would solve my problems. Dad was never going to help, and honestly, I don't want his help anyway. What changed your mind? Sitting in that police station, thinking about how disappointed you must have been, I realized that everything good in my life came from the lessons. You taught me. The hard lessons, the uncomfortable ones. I don't want to skip steps anymore. A year later, Marcus bought his first house. He'd saved $60,000 for the down payment entirely on his own, gotten promoted twice, and increased his salary to $65,000 annually. The day he closed on the property, he invited me over for dinner in his new kitchen. Mom, I have something for you, he said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a check for $12,000 and a letter. Marcus, what is this? It's back rent. I calculated what I should have been paying you during those 6 years I lived at home for free. Obviously, I can't afford to pay back the full amount all at once, but this is a start. Sweetheart, you don't owe me. Yes, I do. Not legally, but morally. You supported me when I didn't deserve it, taught me responsibility when I resisted it, and helped me become the person I am today. This isn't about money, Mom. It's about acknowledgement. The letter explained his calculation. Market rate rent minus the small amounts he'd occasionally contributed, multiplied by 72 months, came to approximately $300,000. He planned to pay me back in installments over the next 10 years. Marcus, I can't accept this. You can, and you will. Because accepting it means acknowledging that what you did mattered. that the lessons you taught me had value, that your sacrifice wasn't wasted. I looked around his kitchen, clean, organized, filled with cooking supplies and actual food instead of takeout containers. Through the window, I could see his small backyard, where he'd already started a vegetable garden. "I'm proud of you," I said simply. "I'm proud of us," he replied. "We figured it out, didn't we? How to be adults together." 6 months after Marcus bought his house, I got an unexpected visitor. Tyler Martinez stood on my doorway, looking older and more serious than I remembered. "Mrs. Holloway, I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I wanted to talk to you about something." "Of course, Tyler. Come in." We sat in my living room, and Tyler seemed nervous, fidgeting with his hands. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened a few years ago. The party, the things we said, how Marcus treated you. I was wondering, do you think you could teach me what you taught him?" "I'm not sure what you mean." Tyler took a deep breath. "I'm 29 years old, Mrs. Holloway. I still live in the same studio apartment. I'm still working the same dead-end job, and I'm still making the same mistakes. Watching Marcus change, seeing him buy a house and get his life together, it made me realize I need help." "What kind of help?" "I don't know exactly. But whatever you did to wake Marcus up, to make him responsible and successful, I need that, too." I studied Tyler's face, seeing genuine vulnerability and determination. "Tyler, I didn't change Marcus. I just stopped enabling him to stay the same." "Then maybe that's what I need too. Someone to stop letting me coast through life." And that's how Tyler became my second tenant. But that's a story for another day. The important thing is this: sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't comfort or convenience. It's the chance to discover their own strength. Marcus learned that lesson the hard way, and it changed both our lives forever. Tyler Martinez moving into my house felt like stepping into a time machine, except this time I knew exactly what I was doing. The difference was, Tyler came asking for structure instead of fighting against it. "I want to pay market rate," Tyler said during our initial negotiation meeting. "Whatever you charged Marcus originally. I don't want any special deals or family discounts." I looked across my kitchen table at this young man who'd once laughed at my authority in my own home. He'd lost weight since I'd last seen him, and there was a seriousness in his eyes that reminded me of Marcus during his transformation. "Tyler, the market rate for a bedroom in this house is $1,800 a month. That includes utilities but not food, and it comes with strict house rules." "I can handle $1,800. What kind of rules?" Over the next hour, I outlined the same basic structure I'd used with Marcus, but adapted for Tyler's specific challenges. No overnight guests without approval. No gaming streams after 10 p.m. on weeknights. Shared responsibility for house maintenance. Most importantly, he had to find stable, full-time employment within 60 days. "What if I can't find a job in 60 days?" Tyler asked. "Then you move out, and we revisit the arrangement when you're ready." Tyler signed the lease that afternoon, but unlike Marcus, he didn't seem resentful or shocked by the terms. If anything, he appeared relieved. "Mrs. Holloway, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When Marcus was going through this process, did you ever doubt yourself? Like, wonder if you were being too harsh?" The question caught me off guard. "Every single day." "Why?" "Because I'm scared I'm too old to change. Marcus was 28 when you made him your tenant. I'm 29, and I've been making the same mistakes for even longer." I studied Tyler's face, seeing echoes of the conversation I'd had with Marcus years earlier. "Tyler, age isn't the issue. Willingness to change is. Are you willing?" That's why I'm here. Tyler moved in on a Saturday in September. Unlike Marcus's gradual takeover of my house, Tyler arrived with just 2 suitcases and a laptop bag. Everything else, he explained, had been sold or given away. "I wanted to start fresh," he said, looking around the guest bedroom that would be his home. Clean slate, you know? The first month was an adjustment for both of us. Tyler was quieter than Marcus had been, more considerate, but also more anxious. He spent hours every day applying for jobs, researching companies, practicing interview techniques. "I've never actually had a real job interview," he confessed one evening as we ate dinner. "I've been freelancing and doing gig work since college. I don't even know how to answer basic questions like, 'Why do you want to work here?' 'What do you want to work there?' I asked. 'Because I need money?' I laughed despite myself. "Tyler, that's not what they want to hear." We spent the evening role-playing. Interview scenarios. Tyler was surprisingly quick to learn, and I found myself enjoying the process of helping him prepare. There was something satisfying about watching someone actively try to improve their situation. 3 weeks into October, Tyler got his first callback. A local marketing firm was looking for a junior account coordinator. The position paid $38,000 annually with benefits and room for advancement. "Mrs. Holloway, I'm freaking out," Tyler said the morning of his interview. "What if I mess this up? Then you'll learn from it and do better at the next one. But what if there isn't a next one? What if this is my only shot?" I sat down across from Tyler at the breakfast table. "Tyler, let me tell you something I learned from watching Marcus. The fear of failure kept him stuck for years. He was so afraid of not being good enough that he never really tried. Don't make the same mistake." Tyler got the job. When he called me from the parking lot after his interview, his voice was shaking with excitement. "They offered me the position on the spot. I start Monday." "Congratulations. How do you feel?" "Terrified. Excited. Like maybe I can actually do this." The changes started immediately. Tyler bought professional clothes, established a morning routine, began contributing meaningfully to household expenses. But more than that, he started carrying himself differently, with purpose, with confidence. 2 months into his employment, Tyler asked if we could have a serious conversation about his living situation. "Mrs. Holloway, I've been thinking about my future here. Not just the next few months, but long-term planning." "What kind of planning?" "I want to start saving for my own place eventually, but I also want to make sure I'm contributing fairly to this household. I've been researching rental prices and I think I should be paying more." This was not the conversation I'd expected. "Tyler, we agreed on $1,800. You don't need to—" "Yes, I do. Mrs. Holloway, you're providing me with more than just housing. You're providing mentorship, stability, and structure. That has value beyond the basic rent." Tyler pulled out a folder with several documents. "I want to increase my rent to $2,000 a month, and I want to formalize some additional responsibilities around the house." "What kind of responsibilities?" "Landscaping, home maintenance, grocery shopping when you're busy with work. I want to contribute to this household in ways that go beyond just paying rent." Looking at Tyler's earnest face, I was reminded of Marcus's transformation. But there was something different about Tyler's approach. He wasn't responding to crisis or ultimatum. He was proactively choosing to step up. "Tyler, why is this so important to you?" "Because for the first time in my adult life, I feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself. This house, this arrangement, it's teaching me how to be responsible. Not just for myself, but for others too." We modified his lease to reflect the new arrangement, but more importantly, Tyler began taking on a role I hadn't expected, that of a supportive member of my household. He started small. Noticing when I was working late and having dinner ready when I got home, handling minor repairs that I'd been putting off, keeping track of household supplies and restocking them before we ran out. "Tyler, you don't have to do all this," I told him one evening after he'd spent the afternoon fixing a leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. "I know I don't have to. I want to. Mrs. Holloway, you gave me a chance when I didn't deserve one. This is how I show my appreciation." 6 months after Tyler started his job, he got his first promotion. Junior account coordinator became account coordinator, with a salary increase to $45,000 annually. "I need to tell you something," Tyler said the day he got the news. "My boss asked me about my living situation. She was impressed that I live with a landlord who's also a mentor. She said it showed maturity and good judgment." "That's wonderful feedback." "Mrs. Holloway, I told her the truth. I told her that 2 years ago I was an entitled deadbeat who disrespected you in your own home. I told her that you gave me a second chance I didn't deserve, and that everything good in my life now came from the structure and accountability you provided." Tyler paused, looking emotional. "She said she wished more young people had that kind of guidance." "What did you tell her?" "I told her they do. They just have to be willing to accept it." The conversation reminded me of something Marcus had said during his transformation. The hardest part wasn't learning new habits. It was admitting he needed help in the first place. Tyler's success began attracting attention from unexpected places. His younger brother, David, started asking questions about Tyler's sudden life improvements. "Tyler's like a different person," David told me when he came to visit one weekend. "He's got his life together. He's confident. He actually seems happy. What happened to him?" "He decided to grow up," I said simply. "Yeah, but how? I mean, what changed?" David Martinez was 25, recently graduated from college, and according to Tyler, struggling with the same issues of direction and motivation that had plagued Tyler for years. "David, why don't you ask your brother directly?" I did. He said I should talk to you. That evening, the three of us sat in my living room discussing David's situation. He was living with his parents, working part-time at a coffee shop, and spending most of his time playing video games or hanging out with friends. "I don't know what I want to do with my life," David admitted. "Everyone expects me to have some grand plan, but I don't. I just want to figure things out without the pressure." Tyler leaned forward. "David, that's exactly what I told myself for years. I just need time to figure things out. You know what I figured out? That you can't think your way into a better life. You have to act your way into it. Easy for you to say now that you've got everything figured out. I don't have everything figured out," Tyler replied, "but I have structure, accountability, and support. That's what makes the difference." David looked at me curiously. "Mrs. Holloway, would you consider taking on another tenant?" The question hung in the air for several seconds. I looked at Tyler, who was nodding encouragingly, then back at David. "David, what makes you think you're ready for the kind of arrangement Tyler and I have?" "Honestly, I don't know if I am, but I know what I'm doing now isn't working, and I know Tyler's approach is." Over the next week, David visited several times to observe the household dynamic. He saw Tyler leaving for work every morning, contributing to meal preparation, handling household responsibilities, and treating our arrangement with the seriousness of a business partnership. "It's like you guys are a team," David observed one evening. "That's exactly what we are," Tyler replied. "Mrs. Holloway isn't just my landlord. She's my partner in making sure I succeed. And I'm her partner in making sure this household runs smoothly." David's application process was more thorough than Tyler's had been. I'd learned from experience that good intentions weren't enough. There had to be specific goals, timelines, and consequences. "David, what do you want to accomplish in the next year?" I asked during our formal interview. "Find a career path that interests me, save money, become independent." Those are good goals, but they're too vague. Let's be specific. Together, we developed a more concrete plan. David would pay $1,200 monthly rent for the first 6 months, while he established himself in a full-time position. After 6 months, rent would increase to $1,800. He had 90 days to find full-time employment that paid at least $35,000 annually. He would contribute 15 hours weekly to household maintenance and improvement projects. Most importantly, he would participate in monthly goal-setting sessions where we'd review his progress and adjust his plan as needed. "This sounds intense," David said after reviewing the lease terms. "It is intense," Tyler replied, That's what makes it work. David moved in just before Christmas, making my house fuller than it had been in years. But unlike the chaos of Marcus's early days, there was an intentionality to this arrangement that made it feel collaborative rather than combative. Tyler had become something of a big brother figure to David, sharing his own experiences and offering guidance based on what he'd learned. Watching them work together, Tyler helping David prepare for job interviews, David helping Tyler with household projects, I realized that something unexpected had developed in my home. I'd accidentally created a support system for young adults transitioning to independence, and it was working better than I'd ever imagined. On New Year's Eve, as the three of us sat in my living room reflecting on the year, Tyler raised his glass of sparkling cider. "I want to make a toast," he said, "to Mrs. Holloway, who taught me that sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the chance to prove they can be better than they think they are." David raised his glass. "And to second chances." I raised mine as well. "To families that aren't defined by blood, but by choice and commitment." As we clinked glasses, I thought about Marcus, now settled in his own home with Amy, still making his monthly payments to me, still calling every week to check in. I thought about the angry, entitled young man who'd called me a tenant in my own house, and the mature, responsible adult he'd become. And I thought about Tyler and David, both on their own journeys toward independence, both benefiting from the structure and accountability that had transformed Marcus. Maybe I hadn't just been teaching them how to be tenants. Maybe I'd been teaching them how to be family. The best part? None of them would ever take that for granted again. 5 years after Marcus first called me just a tenant, I found myself sitting in a courtroom that would change everything I thought I knew about my unconventional family. The call had come on a Thursday morning in June. I was reviewing tax documents for a client when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Patricia Holloway?" "Yes, this is Patricia." "Ms. Holloway, this is Amanda Foster from Child Protective Services. I'm calling about a custody situation involving your tenant, David Martinez." My blood ran cold. "What kind of custody situation?" "Mr. Martinez has listed you as a character reference in his petition for emergency custody of his 8-year-old nephew, Miguel. I need to schedule a home visit to assess the living environment." David hadn't mentioned anything about a nephew, let alone a custody battle. When he came home from work that evening, I was waiting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and a lot of questions. "David, we need to talk." He took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" "Child Protective Services called me today. Something about you seeking custody of your nephew?" David's shoulders sagged, and he sank into the chair across from me. "I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how." Start from the beginning. For the next hour, David explained a family situation I'd never heard him mention. His sister Carmen had been struggling with addiction for years. Her 8-year-old son Miguel had been bouncing between relatives, foster care, and unsafe living situations. Last month, Carmen was arrested again. This time it's serious. Drug trafficking charges. Miguel was placed with our Aunt Rosa, but she's 73 and can barely take care of herself. "Why didn't you tell me about this sooner?" "Because I didn't think I had any options. I'm 26, single, living in someone else's house. What court would give me custody of a kid?" David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd seen him make dozens of times when he was stressed. But then, I started thinking about everything I've learned living here. About stability, structure, and responsibility. About what a real home looks like. "And you think you're ready to raise a child?" "Mrs. Holloway, 2 years ago, I was sleeping on Tyler's couch, working part-time at a coffee shop, with no direction or purpose. Now I have a career, savings, and a stable home environment. If you're willing to let Miguel live here temporarily, I think I can provide him with something he's never had: consistency." The next morning, Amanda Foster arrived for her home inspection. She was a woman in her 50s with graying hair and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too many broken families. "Ms. Holloway, I have to say, this living arrangement is unusual. Multiple unrelated adults sharing a household, formal rental agreements, structured household rules. Can you explain how this works? I walked Amanda through the house, explaining how Tyler and David had each come to live here, the transformation I'd witnessed in both young men, and the supportive environment we'd created together. These aren't just tenants, I found myself saying. They're young adults who needed guidance and structure to become their best selves. This house has become a launching pad for independence. Amanda made notes as we toured each room. When we Satyom reached David's space, she paused to examine the organization, cleanliness, and evidence of stable living. Mr. Martinez has certainly created a mature living environment, she observed. But Ms. Holloway, if David receives custody of his nephew, this would fundamentally change your household dynamic. Are you prepared for that? The question hung in the air as I considered what it would mean to have an 8-year-old child in a house that had been designed for adult accountability and growth. I think it would be good for all of us, I said finally. Miguel would have not one, but 3 adults committed to his well-being. David would have the support he needs to be the best guardian possible. And honestly, this house could use the energy of a child again. 2 weeks later, I met Miguel for the first time. David brought him over for dinner on a Friday evening, explaining that it was a trial visit to see how everyone got along. Miguel was small for 8 years old, with David's dark hair but cautious eyes that seemed far too old for his face. He stayed close to his uncle, speaking only when directly addressed. "Miguel, this is Mrs. Holloway," David said gently. "She's the lady I told you about, the one who owns this house." "Hi," Miguel said quietly, not quite making eye contact. Tyler, who had been surprisingly nervous about meeting Miguel, knelt down to the boy's level. "Hey, Miguel, your Uncle David told me you like video games. Want to see my setup?" For the first time, Miguel's face showed interest. "You have good games?" "Some pretty cool ones, but only the age-appropriate stuff when you're around, okay? Over." Dinner, Miguel gradually relaxed. He asked questions about the house, the neighborhood, and whether there were any kids nearby. When David explained that Miguel might come live with us, the boy's reaction surprised everyone. "Would I have my own room?" "Yes," David said, "a real room that would be just yours. And I wouldn't have to move again?" The pain in that 8-year-old voice broke my heart. "Miguel," I said softly, "if you come live here, this would be your home for as long as you need it to be." The custody hearing was scheduled for a Friday in July. David had been a nervous wreck all week, second-guessing every aspect of his petition. What if they decide I'm too young? What if they think living in a rented room isn't stable enough? What if— "David," Tyler interrupted. "Stop spiraling. You've got this." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've watched you become the most responsible person I know. Because Miguel lights up when he's around you. Because this house has already proven it can transform lives." The morning of the hearing, all 3 of us dressed in our best clothes and drove to the courthouse together. Marcus met us there, having taken time off work to provide character testimony for David. "Mom, I can't believe how nervous I am," Marcus said as we waited in the hallway. "It's like the day I signed my first lease all over again." "Why are you nervous? You're not the one asking for custody." "Because David is family now, and when a family needs support, you show up." The hearing itself was more straightforward than I'd expected. David's lawyer presented evidence of his stable employment, housing situation, and support system. Amanda, Foster testified about the home environment and her assessment of David's readiness for guardianship. When I was called to testify, the judge asked me directly, "Ms. Holloway, are you prepared to have a child living in your home? This would significantly change your living situation." "Your Honor, my living situation has been changing lives for 5 years. Adding Miguel would just mean we have one more person to care about and support." And you believe Mr. Martinez is ready for the responsibility of raising a child? I looked over at David, sitting straight in his chair, wearing the professional clothes he'd learned to choose, exhibiting the confidence he'd developed through structure and accountability. Your Honor. 2 years ago, David Martinez was a young man without direction or purpose. Today, he's a professional with a stable career, savings account, and a support system that includes not just me, but 2 other young men who've learned what it means to be responsible for others. Miguel wouldn't just be getting a guardian, he'd be getting a family. The judge awarded David temporary custody, with a review hearing scheduled for 6 months later. Miguel moved in on a Saturday in August. Tyler and David had spent the previous week transforming the finished basement into a proper bedroom for a child. Age-appropriate decorations, a new bed, a desk for homework, and shelves for books and toys. "This is really mine?" Miguel asked, looking around his new room with wonder. "Really yours," David confirmed. "What do you think?" "It's the best room I've ever had." The first few months were an adjustment for everyone. Miguel had behavioral challenges stemming from years of instability, difficulty sleeping, anxiety about food scarcity, trouble trusting that this living situation would last. But gradually, the structure that had transformed Marcus, Tyler, and David began working its magic on Miguel too. Regular bedtimes, consistent meals, homework supervision, and most importantly, the security of knowing that tomorrow would look basically the same as today. Tyler surprised everyone by becoming Miguel's favorite unofficial uncle. He helped with math homework, taught Miguel age-appropriate video games, and most touchingly, read to him every night before bed. "Tyler, you don't have to do bedtime stories," David said one evening. "That's my responsibility." "I want to," Tyler replied. "Besides, Miguel asked me to finish the chapter, and you never leave a good story unfinished." By Christmas, Miguel had been with us for 4 months. The change in him was remarkable. He was sleeping through the night, his grades had improved dramatically, and most importantly, he'd started referring to the house as home instead of David's place. The permanent custody hearing was scheduled for February. This time, Miguel was old enough to speak to the judge privately about his living preferences. When we arrived at the courthouse, Miguel wore the new suit Tyler and I had bought him for the occasion. He looked confident in a way that reminded me of David's transformation. "Mrs. Patricia," Miguel said as we walked up the courthouse steps, "what if they ask me where I want to live? What would you tell them?" "That I want to stay home, with Uncle David and Uncle Tyler and you." "Uncle Tyler and me," I corrected automatically. Miguel grinned. "Uncle Tyler and you." The judge's questions to Miguel were gentle but thorough. Did he feel safe in his current home? Was he happy with his school and friends? Did he understand that this decision would be permanent? Miguel's answers were clear and confident. "I want to stay with my family. Uncle David takes good care of me. Uncle Tyler helps me with homework and reads me stories, and Mrs. Patricia makes sure everyone is okay." "Mrs. Patricia isn't your aunt or grandmother, Miguel. How do you think of her?" Miguel considered this, seriously. "She's like the person who makes sure our family works right, like the mom of the house, but for grown-ups too." When the judge awarded David permanent custody, the courtroom erupted in quiet celebration. Miguel hugged David first, then Tyler, then me. "We did it," he whispered in my ear. "We get to stay together." 6 months later, I received an unexpected phone call from Margaret Chen. "Patricia, I have some interesting news. I've been contacted by a family court judge who's heard about your living arrangement. She wants to discuss something with you." Judge Rebecca Morrison met me for coffee on a Saturday morning in downtown White Plains. She was younger than I'd expected, probably in her early 40s, with an intensity that reminded me of Margaret. "Ms. Holloway, I've been following your case through Amanda Foster and the Martinez custody proceedings. What you've created in your home is remarkable." "Thank you, Your Honor, but I'm not sure I understand." you've developed an informal system for transitioning young adults to independence while providing them with family-like support. It's addressing a real gap in our social services. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Ms. Holloway, would you consider formalizing this approach? There are dozens of young people aging out of foster care every year who need exactly what you've been providing: structure, accountability, and genuine care. The conversation that followed changed my understanding of what I'd been doing. What had started as tough love for my entitled son had evolved into something much larger. A model for supporting young adults who needed guidance but weren't getting it from traditional family structures. I'd need to think about this, I told Judge Morrison. What I do now works because it's small and personal. I'm not sure it could be scaled up. Maybe it doesn't need to be scaled up. Maybe it needs to be replicated. 3 months later, I found myself standing in front of a room full of social workers, family court judges, and foster care administrators, explaining how a 4-bedroom house in Westchester had become a launching pad for young adults. The key isn't the rules or the rent payments, I explained. It's the combination of high expectations and genuine support. These young people don't need someone to take care of them. They need someone to believe they can take care of themselves. After my presentation, a woman in the audience raised her hand. Ms. Holloway, what would you say to parents who are struggling with adult children who won't launch? I thought about Marcus calling me a tenant, about the hurt and anger that had led to our confrontation, about the years of transformation that followed. I'd say that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop making it comfortable for someone to stay stuck. Love isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about caring. Enough to have difficult conversations and set necessary boundaries. Another hand went up. But what if they choose to leave instead of accepting your terms? Then you let them leave. Because ultimately, you can't force someone to grow up. You can only create conditions where growth is possible and staying stagnant is uncomfortable. As I drove home from the presentation, I thought about the strange journey that had brought me to this point. 5 years ago, I'd been a single mother being disrespected in my own home. Today, I was being asked to share my approach with family courts across New York State. When I walked into my house that evening, I found Tyler helping Miguel with a science project while David prepared dinner. The kitchen smelled like garlic and herbs, homework papers covered the dining room table, and the sound of their conversation filled the house with warmth. How did the presentation go? David asked, looking up from his cooking. They want me to train other people to do what we do here. That's amazing, Tyler said. You should totally do it. I don't know. This works because it's personal. Because we're actually family now. I'm not sure it can be taught. Miguel looked up from his science project. Mrs. Patricia, you taught Uncle David and Uncle Tyler how to be grown-ups, right? I suppose I did. And they taught me how to be a good kid? That's right. Then you can teach other people too. Because the best part isn't the rules or the chores, or paying rent. The best part is knowing that someone cares enough to help you be better. Out of the mouths of babes. 6 months later, I reduced my client load at the accounting firm and began consulting with family courts on alternative support systems for young adults. The Holloway model, as Margaret insisted on calling it, was being piloted in 3 counties across New York State. But the real success wasn't in the programs or the presentations. It was in the young man who called every Sunday to check on his family. It was in the professional who'd learned that accountability and support weren't punishment, but gifts. It was in the uncle who'd stepped up to provide stability for a child who'd never known it. And it was in the 8-year-old boy who fell asleep every night knowing that tomorrow would bring the same loving structure, the same consistent care, the same family who'd chosen him. Marcus had been right all those years ago when he said I was just a tenant in my own house. I was a tenant, a temporary guardian of a space that was really meant to launch people into their own lives. The difference was, now I was proud of that. roll, and none of them would ever take it for granted again. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe. And hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.